Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Now, before we jump in, one quick piece of housekeeping. I will be traveling back to New Zealand, where I'm originally from, in the coming days. As such, it may be difficult to put up regular episodes. There is a possibility that there will not be an episode tomorrow, Tuesday, or will not be one on Wednesday. I will endeavour to try and get both of these episodes up as usual, but I'm just letting you know in advance if you do not see a video in your feed tomorrow or on Wednesday, that is the reason. By Thursday, I should be back in my hometown in New Zealand and back to regular episodes. Now, with that said, let's jump in. And we begin with the Chinese economy. In their recent paper, China's Real Estate Challenge, in the International Monetary Fund's Finance and Development magazine, former chief economist and research department director at the IMF, Kenneth Ragoff, and the IMF's Western Hemisphere Department economist Yuan Changyang examined the challenges facing China's real estate sector and its broader economic implications, including the end of peak China. And in a strong departure from the usual cautious wording of the IMF and its analysts, their conclusions paint a very concerning picture. Their analysis traces the development of China's real estate market, argues for the inevitability of a slowdown, and suggests that the country is not immune to the risks associated with real estate bubbles, as many experts once believed. Now, as we discuss this paper, many of the points made therein by the authors will be very familiar to regular China Update viewers. However, what is significant is it's very rare to see these points being made by senior IMF economists. Ragoff and Young's initial 2020 paper, Peak China Housing, predicted a difficult transition from real estate growth to a more balanced economic model. At that time, the thesis was considered out of consensus. Many experts at that time were optimistic, projecting only a gradual decline in China's property prices and little disruption to the trend of growth. Of course, old viewers of China Update who are following this channel all the way back in 2020 will know that these trends were very obvious for those who cared to look. The consensus among economists at that time was that China's housing market had grown exponentially over the past 3 decades. Prices had risen tenfold since the 1990s, although they still remained relatively low compared to major global cities like New York and London. Furthermore, it was argued, China's remarkable growth trajectory fueled optimism, with most economists forecasting a modest slowdown rather than a sharp decline. However, Ragoff and Young's analysis present an argument for the vulnerability of China's housing market. They noted that real estate bubbles have historically played a central role in financial crises, not just in the West, but across East Asia and Japan. This pattern of credit-fueled booms and subsequent busts is well documented in financial history. The authors assert that while many experts believed China could defy this pattern, the warning signs were already evident years ago. One of the key indicators of potential real estate distress was the rapid escalation of home prices in China's top cities. By 2018, home price-to-income ratios in Beijing, Shenzhen, and Shanghai were already double those of London and Singapore, and 3 times those of New York and Tokyo. In tandem with rising property prices, household debt in China surged, with the household debt to GDP ratio tripling from less than 20% in 2008 to over 60% by 2023. At the same time, inequality continued to rise, with wealth concentrated among the owners of multiple homes, a situation that exacerbated the affordability crisis for lower-income families. Ragoff and Young argue that China's real estate sector, which accounted for a staggering 25% plus of the economy in 2021, had already reached a point of diminishing returns. After 2 decades of rapid construction, including a massive stimulus-driven boom following the 2008 global financial crisis, many parts of China, especially in smaller cities, saw a saturation of new housing. Per capita, housing space in China now exceeds that of any major European country, despite its lower GDP per capita. The sheer scale of this expansion means that future growth in the real estate sector will not provide the same economic returns. Some scholars have suggested that China could transition its construction sector to focus on green initiatives, but Ragoff and Young, as many other analysts have, caution that the sheer size of the sector, accounting for 15% of total employment, makes such a shift difficult, if not impossible. Similarly, while China could ramp up its export activities, geopolitical tensions, particularly with the US and Europe, pose barriers to growth. This has also been well documented on China Update. The authors also present evidence that real estate investment is no longer yielding the same economic benefits in cities with high levels of real estate development. In fact, in many cities, especially in the third tier group, the real estate market is already in decline. As shown by their data, real estate prices in these cities, which make up 60% of China's GDP, have been falling, further highlighting the systemic risks of overbuilding. Whether or not a full-blown financial crisis emerges, the authors argue the slowdown in the real estate market will inevitably have significant repercussions for China's economic growth, consumption, and government finances, all areas we have been covering and following very closely here on China Update. Indeed, they conclude, it represents the end of China's high growth story and the beginning of something much slower and more turbulent. This will not be news to regular China Update viewers, but it is significant to see senior economists with bodies like the IMF, who have historically been so cautious in their critiques of China's economic story, to make these observations in such stark terms. Next up, a quick TikTok update as we've been following this space closely this week. TikTok, the popular video sharing app owned by Chinese company ByteDance, has announced efforts to restore services in the United States after a temporary suspension due to the new law that took effect on January 19th. Yesterday. The law mandates that ByteDance divest TikTok to avoid a potential ban on app stores like Apple and Google hosting the app. While TikTok's web version remained accessible for a time, the mobile app was removed from stores, preventing new downloads and updates. President-elect Donald Trump has stepped in, however, assuring companies involved in TikTok's distribution that they would not face penalties under the new law, as long as the app remains operational. He further proposed a solution involving a joint venture where the US would hold a 50% stake, potentially allowing TikTok to continue functioning in the United States. However, concerns over national security persist, with US lawmakers fearing that the Chinese government could access Americans' personal data through the app, as well as use the app as a type of propaganda deployment instrument. Although TikTok denies such claims, the Trump administration is considering a deal that would limit Chinese control while preserving the app's presence. Critics, including lawmakers like Tom Cotton, argue that there is no legal basis for an extension and warn of the immense legal risks facing companies hosting TikTok. So at this point, it is still very much to be continued. Next up, we have two more developments to cover, but just quickly, I wanted to go through one further piece of housekeeping. I wanted to discuss, especially for new viewers who have joined in the last month or so, my views towards the use of titles and thumbnails. Older regular viewers will know that for the longest time, I really pushed back and resisted the use of more provocative thumbnails and titles. I wanted the thumbnail and title to be as grounded, as balanced, as sober as the content that we cover in the videos themselves. However, as I discussed with the audience at the time, late last year, I said that we were going to experiment with a new thumbnail company, new, more provocative thumbnails and titles to get a sense of what difference it would make to the algorithm and the amount of people that the channel would be shown to. The results were very swift. It showed the use of these more provocative combinations of titles and thumbnails resulted in a massive increase of new viewers. I'm not talking about 50% or 100%, something closer to 1,000%. It became clear that if I wanted this channel to be shown to a new audience, if I wanted it to grow, if I wanted people to have the choice to watch the content that we cover in these videos, I had to play by YouTube's rules and use these more provocative thumbnails and titles. Unfortunately, this is just simply the nature of the platform. Regular viewers should know what to expect with these episodes, and the thumbnails and titles are really more for the algorithm to show the channel to new viewers. My promise then, however, as it is now, as it will always be, is no matter what happens with the thumbnails and the titles, the content within the videos themselves will always remain grounded and sober. That will never change. Thank you everybody for the support, for the appreciation, for the ongoing understanding. I very much appreciate it. Now, let's continue. Next up, the ongoing US-China technology war has reached a new level of intensity, with the United States finalizing a rule targeting connected vehicles, these are smart vehicles, issued by the Department of Commerce last week. The regulation restricts the importation and sales of connected passenger vehicles with links to China or Russia, citing national security concerns. This will mostly affect Chinese vehicles, as the Chinese are much more ahead of EVs and connected vehicles than the Russians. The move is a direct response to the increasing reliance on foreign technologies embedded in modern vehicles, which pose potential risks to Americans' privacy and security. Quote, "Cars today are not just steel on wheels, they are computers," end quote, stated then US Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo. Modern vehicles are equipped with advanced technologies such as cameras, microphones, GPS, and internal connectivity, making them vulnerable to manipulation by foreign adversaries, she added. The new rules aim to prevent the infiltration of these technologies from China and Russia, ensuring that critical infrastructure and automotive supply chains are safeguarded. The rule will go into effect gradually, with software-related prohibitions beginning in 2027 and hardware-related restrictions by 2030. Notably, even vehicles manufactured in the United States but linked to China or Russia will face these limitations. This move was part of a broader strategy by the Biden administration to curb China's growing influence in the technology sector, particularly in industries like artificial intelligence and biotechnology, and will likely continue under the Trump administration. It comes at a time of heightened tensions, with China strongly opposing these restrictions. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce labeled the US actions as, quote, economic coercion, end quote, claiming that such measures will only fuel China's push for technological self-reliance. As the technology war unfolds, both countries are reinforcing their positions. America by protecting its technological infrastructure, and China by doubling down on innovation to break free from external dependencies. The outcome of this escalating conflict could reshape global supply chains and the future of connected technologies. Next up and finally for today, the Chinese Ministry of Public Security has vowed to intensify its efforts to rescue citizens believed to have been kidnapped and trafficked into digital slavery in Myanmar. This statement comes in response to mounting public outrage within China itself over the disappearance of Chinese nationals, including high-profile cases such as actor Wang Xing's abduction. Many of these victims were lured to Myanmar through deceptive job offers, only to find themselves trapped in scam operations, often facing severe exploitation. In a recent update, the MPS emphasized its commitment to coordinate efforts with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Chinese embassies abroad to ensure the safe return of those caught in the human trafficking web. The MPS noted that the scammers have become more aggressive, partly due to a crackdown on telecom fraud and increasing public awareness campaigns. Despite these efforts, the scale of the crisis remains concerning, with families of the missing expressing frustration over the slow response. The public's concern has been amplified by the disappearance of Wang Xing, who was lured to a scam compound near the Thai-Myanmar border and later rescued by Thai authorities. This incident has sparked widespread fear among Chinese travelers, especially with the upcoming Lunar New Year holiday. A significant rise in flight cancellations to Thailand, up by 135% from the previous year, reflects the growing apprehension. The Thai government, aware of the situation's impact on tourism, has pledged to restore Chinese tourists' confidence by addressing the rise in fake news and enhancing cooperation with Chinese law enforcement. The Ministry of Public Security's recent statement also noted that it has captured over 53,000 Chinese suspects linked to fraud and dismantled major crime syndicates in Myanmar. However, despite these victories, the challenge persists, and the tactics of traffickers and scammers are growing more sophisticated. Families of those still missing are actively calling for greater attention to their loved ones, with thousands of desperate messages flooding social media platforms, raising further questions about the ongoing crisis and the role of transnational crime. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much everybody for watching. If all goes to plan, I will see you all for another episode tomorrow.